The Arctic is an unforgiving place. A vast expanse of ice and cold where life clings on by the thinnest thread. For months, the crew of the **SS Resolute *** and I had navigated these desolate waters, enduring the endless days of gray skies and freezing winds. But nothing had prepared us for what we would find. A ship adrift. A vessel that should not have been. It started like any other day. The sun was a faint glow on the horizon, barely penetrating the thick clouds above. I was at the helm, trying to keep my thoughts focused, when the call came from the crow's nest. A ship had been spotted, drifting aimlessly among the ice floes. I raised my spyglass and saw it, a ghostly silhouette against the white backdrop. The name on its side was barely legible. Aurora's Wraith ***. The name alone sent a shiver down my spine. It was a ship of legend, a vessel long thought lost in these treacherous waters. Sailors whispered stories about it, tales of a crew that had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a ship cursed to wander the Arctic forever. And now, here it was, materialized before our eyes. Curiosity overcame caution, and we boarded the Aurora's Wraith, our breath visible in the frigid air. The deck was eerily silent, save for the creaking of wood and the distant howl of the wind. There was no sign of life, just an unsettling stillness that hung in the air. Then we saw them, the crew. They were frozen in place, their bodies contorted in grotesque positions, their faces twisted in expressions of unspeakable horror. Eyes wide open, staring into the abyss, mouths agape as if caught mid-scream. It was a sight that would haunt my nightmares forever. We ventured deeper into the ship, the air growing colder, the shadows darker. The lower decks were worse, the darkness so thick it felt like a living thing, pressing against us. And then we found the captain's log, clutched in the skeletal fingers of the ship's captain, his body slumped over a desk in his quarters. The pages were stained with blood, the writing frantic, desperate. Something is on this ship. Something that should not be. It's coming for us. As I read those words aloud, a sound echoed through the ship. A low, guttural moan, like the breath of a dying beast. The temperature plummeted, the cold seeping into our bones. And then we heard it, footsteps. Slow, deliberate, echoing from the depths of the ship. Panic set in as we scrambled to leave, the moaning growing louder, the footsteps faster, closer. We made it back to the deck, but the ship, it wouldn't let us go. The gangway had frozen solid, trapping us on board. And then from the shadows, something emerged. A figure, or what was left of one. Tall, gaunt, its face a mask of decay and madness, eyes glowing with an unnatural light. It moved toward us, silent, relentless. We fired our weapons, but the bullets passed through it like smoke. I can still hear the screams of my crew. See their faces as they were frozen in terror, just like the crew of the Aurora's Wraith. I'm writing this now, my hands trembling, the frost creeping up my fingers. I don't know how much time I have left, but I know one thing. The ship is alive, and it wants us all. The footsteps are getting closer. I lost track of time after that. Days, maybe weeks passed in a blur of cold and darkness. The whispers became constant, a low murmur that filled my head, drowning out my thoughts, twisting my mind into a maze of fear and confusion. The footsteps, once distant and sporadic, now echoed through the ship at all hours, relentless, a haunting rhythm that matched the frantic beating of my heart. But it wasn't just the sounds that unnerved me. The ship itself seemed to change, its corridors warping and shifting like a labyrinth with no exit. I would walk for what felt like hours, only to find myself back where I started, as if the ship were playing some cruel game, toying with me. The walls would close in, the shadows stretch and twist, and the air grew thick with the smell of decay. The bodies of my crew remained frozen where they stood, untouched by time or the elements, a grim reminder of what awaited me if I didn't find a way out. But escape seemed impossible. The lifeboats were encased in ice, the gangway a solid block of frost, and every attempt to break free was met with failure. It was as if the ship itself had decided that I would be its last prisoner. In the darkest moments, I would see the figure, the thing that had killed my crew, lurking at the edge of my vision, always just out of reach, its eyes glowing with that sickly, unnatural light. It never spoke, never made a sound, but I could feel its presence, its malevolent intent. It wanted something from me, but what I couldn't fathom. And then one night, if it was night at all, I found something that changed everything. I was searching the ship's hold, desperate for anything that could help me escape, when I stumbled upon a hidden compartment concealed behind a stack of old rotting crates. It was a small room, more like a vault, with walls of thick iron and a heavy door that had been bolted shut from the outside. The air inside was stale, the stench of death overpowering. There in the center of the room was a chest, old, covered in dust and rust, but somehow untouched by time. It was as if the chest had been preserved, kept safe from the decay that had consumed the rest of the ship. My hands trembled as I approached it, the whispers in my head growing louder, more frantic, urging me to leave, to turn back. But I couldn't. Something drew me to it, something beyond my control. I knelt before the chest, my breath catching in my throat. As I reached for the lid, it was heavy, the wood creaking as I pried it open. And inside was a journal. Old, leather-bound, its pages yellowed with age. I picked it up, the leather cold against my skin, and opened it to the first page. The handwriting was neat, precise, but the words, they sent a chill down my spine. To whomever finds this, know that you are already doomed. The journal belonged to the captain of the Aurora's Wraith, the man who had led this cursed ship into the Arctic. His entries were meticulous, detailing their voyage, the hardships they faced, and then the discovery. They had found something in the ice, something ancient buried deep within a glacier. A relic, or so they thought, of a civilization lost to time. They brought it aboard, unaware of the curse they had unleashed. The entries grew more frantic as the days passed, the captain's sanity unraveling as the crew began to die, one by one, their faces frozen in terror. He spoke of the figure, the same one that now haunted me, and of the whispers that plagued his mind, driving him to the brink of madness. It wants us all, the final entry read. It feeds on our fear, our souls. There is no escape. We are all damned. Asterisk, asterisk. As I read those words, a realization struck me with the force of a hammer blow. The chest. It wasn't just a container. It was a prison, a seal, meant to keep whatever they had found trapped, to prevent it from spreading its curse. But they had failed. The seal had broken, and now the ship, the crew and I, we were all caught in its grip. The whispers grew louder, almost deafening now, as if they knew I had uncovered the truth. The footsteps returned, closer, faster, as the figure appeared once again, its eyes burning with that unnatural light. But this time it wasn't alone. Shapes began to emerge from the shadows, twisted, decayed, the remains of the crew of the Aurora's Wraith. They moved with unnatural speed, their frozen faces contorted in agony, their eyes blank, devoid of life. They surrounded me, their cold hands reaching out, pulling me down into the darkness. I fought, struggled, but it was no use. The cold seeped into my bones, the darkness consumed me, and the whispers, they became screams. I'm writing this now, but I don't know how much longer I can hold on. The figures are here, with me, always just out of sight, waiting for the moment when I finally break. And when I do, I know I'll join them. This ship is cursed, a death trap, and there is no escape. But there's something else. Something I'm beginning to understand. It wasn't just the relic that cursed this ship. It was something much older, much darker. Something that had been waiting in the ice for centuries, waiting for someone to release it. And now, it's free. I should have died that night. I was certain of it. But instead, I awoke in a place that defied all logic, all reason. The room around me was no longer the cold, decaying hull of the Aurora's Wraith. It was something else entirely. A void, vast and endless, where the darkness was so complete, it felt like it was pressing in on me, smothering me. The whispers were gone, replaced by an eerie silence. Silence so profound it made my ears ring. I stood unsure of where to go, what to do when I saw it. A single light, faint and flickering in the distance. It called to me, a beacon in the abyss, and I began to walk, my steps echoing in the emptiness. As I drew closer, the light grew brighter, more defined, until I could make out the shape of a figure standing in its glow. It was the captain, the man whose journal I had read, whose descent into madness I had witnessed. But he was different now. His face, once frozen in terror, was calm, almost serene. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice a mere whisper in the vastness. "It was never meant for the living." I tried to speak, to ask him what had happened, but no words came out. My throat was dry, my mind racing with questions, with fear. The captain's eyes, once hollow and dead, now glowed with an eerie light. The same light that I had seen in the figure that haunted the ship. "You've seen it, haven't you?" he continued, his tone laced with a strange mix of pity and resignation. "The thing that was buried in the ice. The thing that we unleashed." I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. The captain sighed, his shoulders slumping as if under the weight of a great burden. "We were fools," he said, shaking his head. "We thought we had found something of value, something that could change the world. But what we unearthed was far worse than any of us could have imagined." His eyes locked onto mine, and I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. "It's not just a curse, you see," he whispered. "It's a hunger, an insatiable ancient hunger that feeds on fear, on despair. It consumes the souls of those who encounter it, traps them in a never-ending cycle of torment. And now, it has you." I wanted to scream, to run, but my body wouldn't obey. The captain stepped closer, his voice growing more urgent. "There's only one way to stop it," he said, his gaze intense. "The relic, the chest you found. It was meant to contain the evil, to keep it locked away. But the seal was broken, and now it's spreading, corrupting everything it touches. He reached out, placing a cold, clammy hand on my shoulder. "You have to reseal it," he said, his voice trembling. "Your soul, your life. It's the only thing strong enough to contain the evil. Once you're inside the chest, the seal will hold. But you must do it willingly, or it won't work." I recoiled, my mind rejecting the very idea. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "There has to be another way." "There isn't," the captain replied, his voice hollow. "This is the only way to save the others. To prevent the darkness from spreading, you must do this, or the world will suffer." The void around us began to tremble, the darkness pulsating with a malevolent energy. The whispers returned, louder, more insistent, as if urging me to make a decision. I looked into the captain's eyes, searching for any sign of hope, any glimmer of an alternative. But there was nothing. Just the cold, hard truth staring back at me. The light around us began to fade, the darkness closing in, suffocating me. I knew I didn't have much time. The evil was growing stronger, feeding on my fear, my hesitation. If I didn't act now, it would be too late. With a heavy heart, I nodded. The captain's expression softened, a flicker of relief passing over his face. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely audible. "You're doing the right thing." He stepped back, the light around him growing dimmer, his figure dissolving into the void. The whispers reached a fever pitch, a cacophony of voices urging me to run, to fight, but I knew it was pointless. The decision had been made. The void vanished, and I was back on the ship. The cold, decaying walls of the Aurora's wraith surrounding me once more. The chest lay open before me, the darkness within it almost inviting. I could feel the evil lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for me to make the final move. My hands trembled as I reached for the lid, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. The whispers were deafening now, a chorus of voices screaming at me to stop, to turn back. But I couldn't. I had to do this. With a final, shuddering breath, I climbed into the chest, the darkness wrapping around me like a shroud. The lid slammed shut, and I felt the cold, the terror, the despair consume me. And then, nothing. Silence. Darkness. I was alone, trapped in the void, the whispers gone, the evil contained. But I could feel it, lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for the seal to break, for the next fool to release it. I don't know how long I'll be here, how long the seal will hold. But I know one thing. The evil is patient. It will wait, bide its time until it can escape again. And when it does, God help us all. I thought it was over. The darkness had swallowed me. The void had consumed me, and I believed I had done what was necessary to contain the evil. But in that eternal blackness, I realized how wrong I was. Time lost all meaning. Seconds felt like years, and years felt like seconds. The cold that had once been so biting was now a distant memory. I existed in a state of numbness, neither alive nor dead, trapped in a purgatory of my own making. But in that quiet, in that endless dark, I began to hear it again. The whispering. At first it was faint, barely audible, like a distant echo carried on the wind. But as the days, or perhaps years, passed, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They were no longer just in my mind. They were everywhere, surrounding me, filling the void with their relentless murmur. And then I began to see it. Flashes of light, brief and fleeting, like a lantern swinging in the distance. The darkness began to shift, the void no longer a constant, but a place of change, of motion. I was not alone anymore. The whispers became voices, distinct and clear, speaking in languages I couldn't understand, yet somehow comprehending. They spoke of ancient things, of times before time, of a hunger that could never be sated. They spoke of me, of my failure, of how I had not stopped the evil, but had only given it more time, more power. And then I felt it, the cold. It returned, creeping up from the depths of the void, seeping into my bones, my soul. The darkness was no longer empty. It was alive, pulsating with a terrible energy, and I knew then that the evil had not been contained. It had only been waiting, gathering strength, and now it was ready to break free. The chest, my prison, began to shake, the walls around me cracking, splintering as the darkness surged, forcing its way out. I screamed, a soundless cry that echoed in the void, but there was no escape. The evil had me, and it was going to use me to unleash its full fury upon the world. Suddenly, I was back on the Aurora's wraith, the ship's decaying walls closing in around me. The chest was gone, shattered into 1,000 pieces, and I was standing in the captain's quarters, the cold more intense than ever before. The crew, my crew, stood around me, their faces frozen in terror, their eyes pleading for help that I couldn't give. The figure, the thing that had haunted me, stood before them, its eyes glowing with that sickly, unnatural light. But it was different now, more powerful, more malevolent. It looked at me and I could feel its hatred, its hunger consuming me. "Did you think you could stop me?" It whispered, its voice a blend of 1,000 souls, twisted and broken. You were always doomed, just like them. The figure raised a hand and I felt an unimaginable pain rip through me, as if my very soul was being torn apart. The darkness surged, filling the ship, the walls twisting and warping as the evil spread, corrupting everything in its path. The crew began to scream, their voices joining the chorus of whispers, and I realized, with a horror that made my blood run cold, that I had failed. The evil had won. The figure stepped closer, its eyes burning into mine, and I knew what it wanted. It wanted me to suffer, to be consumed by the same terror that had claimed the others. But more than that, it wanted me to watch, to see what it would do to the world once it was free. "Your sacrifice was meaningless!" it hissed, its voice dripping with malice. "And now you will witness the end." The ship began to shake, the ice around it cracking, splintering as the darkness tore through the hull. The water surged in, freezing and relentless, and I could feel the ship being pulled down, dragged into the depths of the Arctic. But the figure didn't move. It stood there, watching me, its eyes glowing with that terrible light, as the darkness closed in around us. And then, just as the ship was about to be swallowed by the ice, I heard a sound, a low, rumbling noise that seemed to come from the very earth itself. The ice exploded, shards of it flying through the air, and the ship was torn apart, splintered into 1,000 pieces. The water surged up, filling the void, and I was thrown into the darkness, the cold, the pain, overwhelming me. But in that moment, just before I was consumed, I saw something. A flash of light, bright and blinding, cutting through the darkness. It was the seal, the ancient relic that had been meant to contain the evil. But now it was more powerful, more complete. The light engulfed the figure, and I heard it scream, a sound of pure rage and terror, as it was torn apart, its essence shattered and scattered to the winds. The darkness receded, the cold vanished, and I was left alone, floating in the void, the whispers gone, the pain gone. I don't know how long I stayed there, in that place of nothingness, but eventually I felt a pull, a force drawing me back to the world of the living. And when I opened my eyes, I was on the deck of the **SS Resolute ***, the Arctic wind biting at my skin, the sun just a faint glow on the horizon. The aurora's wraith was gone, swallowed by the ice, and with it, the evil that had haunted it. The crew, my crew, lay frozen around me, their faces twisted in terror. But there was something different now. Peace. The darkness had been vanquished, the evil contained once more, and the world was safe. For now, I stood there, alone, the only survivor, and I knew that the battle was not over. The evil would return, as it always does, and when it did, someone else would have to stand against it. But for now, the Arctic was silent, the ice calm, and I could finally rest.